The fragile wings of Yuna trembled as she huddled against the cold metal of the station's outer hull. Supreme Commander Tejo of the Drozerian Empire had discarded her like refuse when her left wing had been damaged in an accident aboard his warship. Defective property is not worth the resources to repair, Tejo had sneered, his scaled face twisting with disgust. Remove this useless creature from my sight. The trading outpost teemed with species from across the galaxy, none sparing a glance for the small Kaelan female dying slowly in the shadows. Her species' delicate avian features and hollow bones made them perfect for certain tasks, until they broke. 3 cycles without nutrient paste had left Yuna weak. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. "Hey there," a soft voice called. "Are you all right?" Yuna looked up to see a human male crouching before her, concern etched on his face. Humans were still rare in this sector. This one called himself Hyun. Yuna shrank back, her damaged wing tucked tightly against her body. She had learned long ago that attention from others always meant pain, especially from large beings like this human, who towered over her small frame. "Stay away," she whispered, her voice raspy from thirst. The trade language felt strange on her tongue after days of silence. Hyun didn't move closer. Instead, he sat down on the dirty floor of the docking bay, making himself smaller. "You're hurt," he said simply. He pulled out a small container and set it between them. "Water. Clean." Yuna's throat burned with need, but she didn't reach for it. This had to be a trick. Perhaps he worked for Tejo, sent to find his lost property. "I don't belong to anyone." She lied, though the ownership mark burned into the base of her neck said otherwise. "I didn't say you did," Hyun replied. His eyes were a strange color, dark brown like the rich soil of her homeworld, a place she barely remembered after 15 cycles in service. A group of Drozerian soldiers marched past the alcove where they sat. Yuna pressed herself further into the shadows, trembling so hard her feathers rustled. Hyun noticed but didn't comment. He simply shifted his position, his broad back now blocking her from view. The soldiers passed without looking their way. "They're looking for you," he asked when they were gone. Yuna hesitated. "No, not anymore. I am discarded." Understanding flashed across Hyun's face. He knew what that meant in Drozerian culture. Trash. No longer worth tracking. "My ship leaves in 2 hours," he said, pushing the water closer to her. "Drink." This time, Yuna's thirst won over caution. She snatched the container and drank deeply, expecting him to strike her for her boldness. He didn't. "I trade medical supplies," Hyun continued as if they were having a normal conversation. "Heading to Stellar Point next. It's far from Drozerian space." Yuna lowered the container. "Why tell me this?" "Because you need a way off this station before you die here," he said bluntly. "And I have space." "I cannot pay," she said, her crest feathers flattening in shame. Kaelans were taught from hatching that nothing came without cost. Hyun shrugged. "I'm not asking for payment." "Then what do you want from me?" Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Nothing you don't want to give," he said. "But my medic left last port. I could use someone with steady hands to help sort supplies." It was a lie. A kind one, but still a lie. Yuna could tell by the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers when he mentioned needing help. He was offering charity, disguised as employment to spare her pride. "My wing is damaged," she said, lifting the injured limb slightly. "I am not functional." "Wings heal," Hyun replied. "We have a good med bay." A Kaelan with a damaged wing was worthless. This was what she had been taught by Tejo and the Drozerians before him. And yet this human spoke as if her injury was temporary, as if she could be more than the broken thing Tejo had thrown away. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Hyun seemed surprised by the question. "Because you need help," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. Before Yuna could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed across the docking area. "Attention all beings," a mechanical voice announced. "This is a security alert. All personnel are ordered to report suspicious activity. Drozerian property has been reported missing. Repeat, Drozerian property has been reported missing. Yuna froze. Discarded or not, Taejo must have realized she might survive long enough to be found, to tell tales of what she had seen aboard his ship, the secrets she knew. Come with me now, Hyun said, urgency replacing his calm tone. My ship is docked in Bay 47. They'll scan your ship, Yuna whispered, panic rising. They'll find me. Hyun reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal disc. Human tech. Scrambles biosignatures. It won't last long, but it will get you past the scanners. Yuna stared at the human, trying to understand his kindness. In her experience, kindness always had a hidden cost. Why risk trouble for me? I'm nobody. Hyun smiled, a strange expression that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. That's where you're wrong, he said. You're somebody who needs help. That's enough for me. For the first time in many cycles, Yuna felt something other than fear or pain. It was small, fragile, but unmistakable. Hope. She took the disc from his hand and stood on shaky legs. Bay 47, she repeated. I'll be right behind you, Hyun promised. Just walk normally. You belong there, understand? Yuna nodded and stepped out of the shadows, her heart pounding. She had no reason to trust this human, no reason to believe she would survive the day. And yet, as she walked toward Bay 47 with Hyun following at a distance, she felt something stir within her broken spirit. Perhaps she wasn't useless after all. Perhaps, just maybe, she was worth saving. Aboard Hyun's modest trading vessel, the Starlight, Yuna waited for the true purpose of her rescue to be revealed. Drozerians never did anything without calculating the value gained. Yet days passed, and Hyun only provided her with a small cabin, nutrients tailored to her species, and medical attention for her wing. Why help me? She finally asked as Hyun carefully applied regenerative compound to her damaged wing membrane. Because you needed help, he answered simply. When a Drozerian patrol vessel hailed them near the Pyongyang Nebula, demanding the return of stolen Imperial property, Hyun stood before the communication screen without fear. She's crew, not property, he stated. Under Article 7 of the Human Federation Charter, I claim protective status. The Drozerian commander hissed with rage but withdrew. Humans were too new to the galactic community to risk an incident over one damaged slave. Yuna sat alone in her cabin, her fingers tracing the soft fabric of the blanket Hyun had given her. 7 days had passed since her rescue from the trading station. 7 days of waiting for the other Talon to drop. 7 days of kindness that made no sense to her. The ship hummed softly around her, the gentle vibration unlike the harsh rumble of Drozerian vessels. Everything here was different. The air smelled clean, not thick with the musk of her former masters. The lights were adjusted to a softer spectrum that didn't hurt her sensitive eyes. Even the food, real food, not nutrient paste, was prepared with care for her specific needs. A soft chime sounded at her door. Come in, she said, still unused to having control over her own space. The door slid open to reveal Jin, the ship's engineer. He was shorter than Hyun, with quick hands and a quiet voice. I brought you something, he said, holding out a small device. It's a translator, better than the basic station model you've been using. This one catches the subtones in Kalan speech. Yuna took it carefully. Thank you. But why waste resources on me? Jin tilted his head. It's not waste. Communication is important between crewmates. There it was again, the casual inclusion, as if she belonged here. As if she had value beyond her utility. I'm not really crew, she said softly. I can't even fly yet. Jin shrugged. Flying isn't a job requirement on a spaceship. We all have our functions. He smiled. Try it on. Let me know if it needs adjusting. After he left, Yuna placed the translator against her neck. It adhered gently, the cool surface warming to match her body temperature. She spoke a phrase in her native tongue, one she hadn't uttered in years. The device hummed slightly. "The stars remember what we forget." It translated perfectly, catching the melodic upturn that carried the cultural context of hope. Tears formed in her eyes. No Drozerian had ever cared that Kalen spoke in music as much as words. Later, in the medical bay, Hyun examined her wing. His hands were gentle as he tested the healing membrane. "The regeneration is taking well," he said. "Another few weeks and you might be able to try limited flight in the cargo bay." Yuna couldn't contain her surprise. "You would allow me to fly? Inside the ship?" "Of course. It's part of your rehabilitation." He looked up from his work. "Why wouldn't I?" Commander Taejo said flying privileges were earned through perfect service. I never qualified. Hyun's face darkened briefly. "Flying isn't a privilege for you, Yuna. It's a biological function, like breathing." He returned to applying the healing compound, his touch never faltering despite the anger she sensed in him. Anger not at her, but for her. It was a strange concept. "The compound tingles," she said, trying to understand this human better. "How does it work?" Hyun seemed pleased at her question. "It contains synthetic growth factors that bind to your cell receptors. Your body does the actual healing. The compound just accelerates the process." He explained the science with respect, assuming her intelligence rather than speaking down to her as Taejo had always done. Yuna found herself asking more questions, each answered with patience. The ship's alert system interrupted their conversation. Approaching vessel detected. Drozerian signature. Hyun's expression turned serious. "Stay here," he told Yuna. "I'll handle this." Fear clutched at her heart. "They've come for me." "No," Hyun said firmly. "They've come to ask questions, but they'll leave with nothing." She followed him despite his instructions, heaping to the shadows of the corridor. The bridge was small, just large enough for the four-person crew. Through the view screen, she could see the sleek, predatory shape of a Drozerian patrol ship. "Human vessel." A cold voice crackled over the comm. "This is Commander Yuri of the Drozerian Empire. Our scans indicate the presence of Kalen biological markers aboard your ship. Surrender the stolen property immediately." Hyun stood tall before the screen. "This is Captain Hyun of the Human Federation vessel Starlight. We have no stolen property aboard. We have a Kalen crew member who is under Federation protection." The Drozerian commander's scaled face filled the screen, yellow eyes narrowing. "Kalens are the property of the Empire. Return what belongs to us." "She's crew, not property," Hyun stated without hesitation. "Under Article 7 of the Human Federation Charter, I claim protective status." "Your Federation has no authority here," Commander Yuri hissed. "Perhaps not," Hyun agreed calmly. "But I believe you'll find the Treaty of Ganymede, which your Empire signed last solar cycle, recognizes our crew protection rights within neutral space. We are currently in the Pyongyang Nebula, which is designated neutral territory." Yuna watched in amazement as Hyun stood his ground. He wasn't physically imposing compared to the Drozerian, yet he showed no fear. The commander's face contorted with rage. "This matter is not concluded, human. The Empire does not forget." The communication cut off abruptly. "They're moving away," reported Mina, the pilot. "Returning to patrol pattern." Only then did Hyun's shoulders relax slightly. He turned and saw Yuna in the doorway. "I told you to stay in the medical bay," he said, but there was no anger in his voice. "I needed to see," she replied. "No one has ever stood up for me before." The rest of the crew looked at her with expressions he couldn't quite read. Sympathy. Respect. "Get used to it," Jin said from his engineering station. "Humans are stubborn that way." For the first time since her rescue, Yuna felt something settle within her. Not just hope, but something deeper, something like belonging. That night, in the privacy of her cabin, she tested her damaged wing. The membrane was still thin in places, but Hyun was right. It was healing. Someday soon, she might fly again. And for the first time, She believed she would be allowed to. "What is this sound?" Yuna asked, her head tilted toward the speakers in the ship's common area. "Music," replied Jisoo, the ship's navigator and Hyun's sister. "This piece is from Earth. Do you like it?" Yuna's species had never been allowed art or music. Their value was in service, nothing more. Yet here she was, being asked her opinion as if it mattered. When pirates attacked near the Hammond asteroid field, Yuna recognized their formation patterns from her time on Taejo's warship. "They'll target your engine shielding from below," she warned. It's standard Drozerian raiding technique. Her knowledge saved the ship. That night, instead of being punished for speaking out of turn, she was celebrated with a feast. Hyun raised his glass to her, his eyes warm. "To Yuna, whose value goes far beyond what others could see." Yuna stood in the center of the Starlight's common area, her wings now fully extended without pain. After 3 weeks aboard the human vessel, her injuries had healed enough for her to stretch properly. The ship's gravity was set slightly lower than standard, a kindness she had never expected. "Try again," Jisoo encouraged, adjusting something on the control panel. "Feel the rhythm." The music filled the room once more, a melody unlike anything Yuna had ever heard. It rose and fell like ocean waves, instruments blending together in patterns that made her heart beat faster. "I don't understand what I should do," Yuna admitted, her crest feathers rising with embarrassment. "There's no should," Jisoo explained patiently. "Just feel it. Move how it makes you want to move." This concept was foreign to Yuna. In her life before, every movement had purpose. Efficiency was demanded. Anything else was waste. Waste was punished. But Jisoo was watching her with friendly eyes, not the cold stare of a master expecting performance. Slowly, hesitantly, Yuna let her wings rise with the swelling notes. When the music quickened, she found her feet lifting from the floor, her natural hover instinct responding to the tempo. "That's it." Jisoo clapped her hands. "You're dancing." "Dancing." Yuna repeated the unfamiliar word, a movement without purpose beyond joy. The concept was revolutionary. Later, in the small hydroponics bay where Jin grew fresh vegetables, Yuna helped harvest leafy greens for the evening meal. Her nimble fingers were perfect for the delicate work. "You have a good touch," Jin commented as she carefully separated the roots. "These will grow back stronger now." "I've never grown anything before," Yuna said. "Kalins are not permitted to produce food, only serve it." Jin frowned. "That makes no sense. Your species evolved as gatherers. It's in your genetic memory." "The Drozerians believe our natural abilities should be channeled only toward their needs," Yuna explained. "Knowledge is given on a need-to-know basis. And yet you knew enough about Drozerian battle tactics to recognize pirate formations," Jin pointed out. "How did you learn that?" Yuna's wings rustled nervously. "I was assigned to clean Commander Taejo's war room during strategy sessions. I was considered furniture, not a being capable of understanding." Jin's eyes widened. "You learned complex tactical patterns just by observing while you worked." "Is that unusual?" Yuna asked. "It's brilliant," Jin said simply. The ship's alarm cut through their conversation. Red lights pulsed throughout the vessel. "All crew to stations," Hyun's voice came over the comm. "Unidentified vessels approaching fast from the Hammond field." Jin rushed to engineering while Yuna made her way to the bridge. Though she had no official station, she had spent enough time there to feel drawn to the command center in a crisis. The view screen showed 3 small, aggressive-looking ships approaching in a distinctive formation. "Pirates," Minna said from the pilot's seat. "They're blocking our exit vector." "Shields up," Hyun ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Yuna studied the approaching vessels. Something about their movement pattern triggered a memory. "These aren't ordinary pirates," she said quietly. The bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "What do you mean?" Hyun asked. "The formation," Yuna explained, pointing to the screen. "It's a modified Drozerian flanking pattern. These are trained military, not random raiders." "How can you be sure?" Jisoo asked from the navigation console. I've seen it before, in Commander Taejo's tactical simulations. They'll seem disorganized at first, then suddenly coordinate. Yuna's wings spread slightly as she focused. They'll target your engine shielding from below. It's standard Drozerian raiding technique. Hyun didn't hesitate. Minna, reposition. Concentrate rear shields to the lower quadrant. That will leave our upper port side vulnerable, Minna warned. Do it anyway, Hyun said firmly. Jin, prepare for power fluctuations. Within moments, the pirates made their move, exactly as Yuna had predicted. Their formation tightened, and they dove beneath the starlight, weapons firing at the spot where the engine shields would normally be weakest. But the starlight was ready. The reinforced shields held, and Minna used the momentum to spin the ship, bringing their weapons to bear on the surprised attackers. Return fire, Hyun ordered. Target their propulsion systems only. The starlight's defensive weapons struck with precision. One pirate vessel veered off, trailing plasma. The others quickly retreated, their coordinated attack falling apart. They're running, Jisoo confirmed as the ships disappeared into the asteroid field. Hyun turned to Yuna, who stood frozen, suddenly afraid. She had spoken out of turn, had inserted herself into command decisions. Among the Drozerians, such presumption would merit severe punishment. I'm sorry, she said quickly, wings folding tight against her back in the Kalen gesture of submission. I should not have interfered. Hyun looked confused. Then understanding dawned in his eyes. Yuna, you didn't interfere. You saved us all. But I spoke without permission. I questioned your command. You shared critical information that protected the ship and crew. Hyun corrected gently. That's not just allowed here. It's expected. That evening, the crew gathered for a special meal. Jin had prepared fresh vegetables from the hydroponics bay. Minna had broken out rare spices she'd been saving. Jisoo had programmed the ship's systems to play the music Yuna had enjoyed earlier. Hyun stood at the head of the small table, a cup raised in his hand. Tonight, we celebrate not just our survival, but the reason for it. He looked directly at Yuna. To Yuna, whose value goes far beyond what others could see. The others raised their cups as well, all smiling at her. Not the false smiles of masters pleased with the servant, but the warm expressions of equals acknowledging one of their own. I don't understand, Yuna said softly. I only did what was necessary. And that's exactly it, Jisoo explained. You saw what needed to be done, and did it. That's what crew does. That's what family does. Family, Yuna repeated. Another new concept to explore, another gift freely given. As the evening continued, filled with conversation and laughter, Yuna found herself moving slightly to the music without conscious thought. Dancing, as Jisoo had called it. A small personal joy. For the first time in her life, she began to understand what freedom truly meant. Not just the absence of masters, but the presence of choice. The right to have opinions. The ability to contribute. The chance to be valued for who she was, not just what she could do. The central hub of Sector 8 glittered like a cosmic jewel. Yuma, her wing now mostly healed, stood frozen as she spotted Supreme Commander Taejo disembarking from his personal shuttle for the Galactic Commerce Summit. He'll try to take me back, she whispered to Hyun. Not while I breathe, he answered. When Taejo's guards surrounded them in the marketplace, demanding the return of Imperial property, Hyun requested an immediate hearing before the sector authority. In the austere chamber of judgment, Yuna trembled until Hyun gently touched her shoulder. Tell them your truth, he said quietly. Standing before representatives of 12 species, Yuna found her voice for the first time. I was discarded as worthless, she began. Then a human showed me that worth isn't measured by utility, but by inherent dignity. Yuna had never seen anything like Central Hub before. The massive space station housed thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Light reflected off crystal spires that reached toward the stars. Markets bustled with traders selling goods from 100 worlds. The air itself seemed alive with possibility. "It's beautiful," she said, her newly healed wings fluttering with excitement. "Wait until you see the gardens," Jisoo replied with a smile. "They have plants from every Federation world." The Starlight had docked for resupply and trade. After months in space, the crew was eager for fresh air, even the recycled variety of a station. For Yuna, it was her first time in a public space as a free being rather than a slave. "Remember, you're registered as crew now," Hyun reminded her as they prepared to disembark. "Your documents are in order. You have rights here." Yuna nodded, though anxiety still fluttered in her chest. She wore a simple jacket designed for Kalins, with slits for her wings and a hood that could cover her distinctive crest feathers if needed. Jisoo had helped her choose it from the ship's fabricator. "Ready?" Hyun asked. "Ready," Yuna confirmed, squaring her shoulders. They moved through customs without incident. The board official barely glanced at her documentation before waving them through. Such a simple thing, Yuna thought, to be treated like anyone else. The main marketplace was a riot of color and sound. Yuna's senses, always sharp, were nearly overwhelmed by the variety. Spices from worlds she'd never heard of, fabrics and patterns that seemed to shift as she looked at them, voices speaking languages the translator in her collar couldn't even identify. "Look," Jin said, pointing to a stall selling Kalin wind chimes. "Those are from your homeworld." Yuna approached cautiously. The delicate metal pieces caught the light, designed to sing in the specific wind patterns of the Kalin Mountains. She had been taken from her world so young that she barely remembered such things. "Would you like one?" Hyun asked quietly. Before she could answer, a hush fell over the nearby crowd. Beings of all species moved aside as a procession entered the marketplace. At its center walked a tall, scaled figure in an elaborate military dress. Yuna's blood turned to ice. Supreme Commander Taejo. She instinctively stepped back, bumping into Hyun, who steadied her with a gentle hand. "It's him," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Hyun's expression hardened as he watched the Drozerian commander survey the market like he owned everything in it, which, Yuna knew, was exactly how Taejo viewed the galaxy. "He won't see you," Hyun assured her. "There are thousands of beings here." But fate was not so kind. As Taejo's procession moved through the marketplace, one of his guards, a sharp-eyed Drozerian female, caught sight of Yuna. The guard leaned close to Taejo, whispering something that made the commander stop and turn. Yellow eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Yuna. Recognition, then rage, flashed across Taejo's scaled face. "Property of the Empire," he called out, his voice cutting through the market noise. "Seize that, Kalin." Guards moved with military precision, surrounding Yuna and the Starlight crew before they could retreat. "This Kalin bears the mark of imperial ownership," one guard announced. "By law, it must be returned to its rightful master." Hyun stepped forward, placing himself between Yuna and the guards. "She is registered crew aboard a human Federation vessel. She's under our protection." Taejo pushed through his guards, towering over Hyun. "This property was stolen from me. Its registration is fraudulent." "I was discarded," Yuna found herself saying, her voice stronger than she expected. "You threw me away." Taejo's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Property cannot discard itself. Your theft will be punished." A crowd had gathered now, watching the confrontation with the morbid interest of those witnessing someone else's trouble. Among them, Yuna noticed beings in the distinctive uniforms of hub security. "I request an immediate hearing before the sector authority," Hyun announced loudly, ensuring his voice carried to the security personnel. "Under hub law, Section 4, Paragraph 7, any dispute over sentient status must be heard by a neutral arbiter." Taejo hissed with displeasure. "There is no dispute. The Empire's claim is clear." One of the security officers stepped forward. "Nevertheless, protocol must be followed. The hearing will convene in 1 hour. Both parties will present their case." Taejo's guards were forced to stand down, though they remained close as the group was escorted to the justice sector of the hub. What will happen? Yuna asked Hyun as they walked. What if they give me back to him? They won't, Hyun said firmly. But you need to be prepared to speak, to tell them what happened to you. Yuna's wings trembled. I've never spoken to authorities before. Just tell them your truth, he said. Your experiences matter. The Chamber of Judgment was a circular room with seats for representatives from each of the 12 species that formed the hub's governing council. Taejo stood on one side, his military bearing rigid with controlled fury. Yuna and Hyun stood on the other, joined by Jin and Jisoo, who had insisted on coming as witnesses. The head arbiter, a serene Volorn with silver skin, called the hearing to order. We are gathered to determine the status of the Kalan known as Yuna. Supreme Commander Taejo claims ownership. Captain Hyun claims she is free crew. We will hear both sides. Taejo spoke first, his voice smooth and persuasive. The Empire has held rightful dominion over the Kalan species for centuries. This particular specimen was bred for service in my household. When it was damaged beyond useful function, I humanely discarded it rather than wasting resources on repair. The human illegally salvaged my property. The chamber remained silent, faces impassive. Yuna couldn't tell if they were moved by Taejo's words or disgusted by them. Captain Hyun, your response. The arbiter prompted. Yuna is a sentient being, Hyun stated simply. She thinks, feels, and chooses. No sentient being can be property. The Human Federation recognizes all thinking species as people, not things. We found Yuna abandoned and dying. We offered her sanctuary and healing. She chose to join our crew. That choice must be respected. The arbiter turned to Yuna. The council would hear from the subject directly. Yuna stepped forward, forcing herself to look up at the 12 faces staring down at her. Her wings spread slightly, showing her healed membranes. I was discarded as worthless, she began, her voice soft but clear. Commander Taejo ordered me thrown away because my damaged wing made me useless to him. For 3 days I waited to die, alone and afraid. She paused, gathering strength from the memory of what came after. Then a human showed me that worth isn't measured by utility, but by inherent dignity. Hyun and his crew didn't see a broken tool. They saw a person in need. They healed my wing, yes, but more importantly, they healed my spirit. They taught me that I have value beyond what I can do for others. The chamber was utterly silent now. Even Taejo seemed momentarily stunned by her articulate speech. I have learned to fly again, Yuna continued. I have learned to think for myself, to make choices, to help others not from fear, but from care. I ask this council, are these not the actions of a person, not property? The arbiter studied her for a long moment, then turned to the council. We will deliberate. As they waited for the decision, Hyun squeezed Yuna's shoulder gently. Whatever happens, he whispered, you've already won by finding your voice. Yuna realized with surprise that she believed him. Even if the worst happened, she had changed. She was no longer the frightened, broken creature Taejo had discarded. She was Yuna, and she had worth. The ruling echoed through subspace communications across 3 sectors. The Kalan known as Yuna is recognized as a sentient being with full rights of personhood. Supreme Commander Taejo's rage manifested in a forbidden energy weapon drawn in the chamber. Before he could fire at Yuna, Hyun threw himself forward, but the security forces were faster, neutralizing the Drozerian with stunning precision. Within a lunar cycle, reports flooded in of Kalans throughout Drozerian territory, claiming their freedom based on the precedent. What will you do now? Hyun asked Yuna, as they stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. Her newly healed wings flexed gently. Stay with you, with humans. Your people's supposed weakness, compassion, has proven stronger than millennia of Drozerian dominance. She turned to face the vastness of space, where thousands of her kind were now experiencing freedom for the first time. The universe is about to discover what happens when you underestimate both humans and those they choose to protect. The chamber fell silent as the head arbiter rose to deliver the council's decision. Yuna's wings trembled slightly, but she stood tall, a far cry from the broken creature Hyun had found months ago. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, the silver-skinned Valorn announced, "This council finds the following. The Kalan known as Yuna is recognized as a sentient being with full rights of personhood." A murmur spread through the watching crowd. The arbiter raised a hand for silence. Furthermore, this ruling shall establish precedent for all Kalan beings. No sentient species may be claimed as property within hub jurisdiction. This decision is final and binding. Jisoo grabbed Yuna's hand and squeezed it tight. Jin let out a whoop of joy that echoed in the formal chamber. Hyun simply smiled, his eyes filled with pride. But across the room, Supreme Commander Taejo's face contorted with fury. His scaled skin darkened to a dangerous red. In one swift motion, he reached inside his ceremonial uniform and withdrew a small device, an energy weapon, its tip glowing with deadly purple light. "If I cannot have my property," he snarled, "no one will." He aimed directly at Yuna's heart. Time seemed to slow. Hyun launched himself forward, trying to block the shot with his own body. Yuna's wings spread wide in instinctive defense. But before Taejo could fire, a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The Drozerian commander jerked backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. Hub security officers had moved with stunning speed, neutralizing him with precision stun bolts. Commander Taejo is hereby charged with attempted murder and possession of forbidden weapons in a peace zone, the security chief announced, her voice cold. "Take him to containment." As Taejo was dragged away, still struggling and spitting threats, Yuna found herself surrounded by her human family. Hyun checked her for injury, his hands gentle on her wings. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm free." The next days passed in a blur. News of the ruling spread through subspace communications, faster than any ship could travel. Yuna found herself speaking with hub officials, human diplomats, and even a few brave Kalans who had already been working in secret toward liberation. "Your case has changed everything," a female Kalan named Duri told her during one such meeting. Duri worked as a translator on the hub, one of the few Kalans who had managed to gain a measure of independence before the ruling. "I didn't mean to start a revolution," Yuna said. "I just wanted to stay with my friends." "Sometimes the smallest actions cause the greatest changes," Duri replied, her crest feathers rising with emotion. "Already, thousands of our people are claiming their freedom. The Drozerians cannot fight this, not with both the hub and the Human Federation supporting the ruling." Reports confirmed Duri's words. Throughout Drozerian territory, Kalans were refusing orders, demanding recognition, seeking sanctuary with other species. The Empire's carefully constructed system of slavery was crumbling from within. 2 weeks after the ruling, as the Starlight prepared to depart from the hub, Yuna stood on the observation deck. The vast window showed not just stars, but dozens of ships arriving and departing. Among them were vessels carrying Kalan refugees to new homes throughout Federation space. Hyun joined her, standing quietly at her side for a moment before speaking. "Our trade route is approved," he said. "We can leave as soon as tomorrow. But before we go, I wanted to ask." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "What will you do now?" Yuna turned to look at him, this human who had changed her life by a simple act of kindness. "What do you mean?" "You're free now, truly free," Hyun explained. "You could go anywhere, do anything. The Federation has offered education programs for liberated Kalans, or you could join Duri's cultural preservation project. Your future is yours to choose." Yuna considered his words. Freedom was still a new concept, rich with possibilities she was just beginning to understand. She could feel the gentle hum of the station around her, the distant pull of stars she'd never seen. Then she looked at Hyun, at the ship that had become her home, at the humans who had become her family. Her newly healed wings flexed gently, as she made her decision. I want to stay with you, with humans. Your people's supposed weakness, compassion, has proven stronger than millennia of Drozerian dominance. The relief on Hyun's face was immediate and genuine. You're sure? The Starlight is just a small trading vessel. Your potential is limitless now. And I choose to use that potential with people who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. Yuna moved to the window, watching as a ship filled with freed Kalins departed for a new colony world. Besides, there is still much work to do. Many of my people have never known freedom. They will need guides who understand both worlds. You would be an excellent ambassador, Hyun agreed, joining her at the window. Not just for Kalins, Yuna said. For humans too. Most species in this galaxy still don't understand your kind. They see your compassion as weakness, your willingness to help strangers as naivety. She turned to face the vastness of space, where thousands of her kind were now experiencing freedom for the first time. Stars reflected in her large eyes, no longer dimmed by fear, but bright with purpose. The universe is about to discover what happens when you underestimate both humans and those they choose to protect. The next morning, as the Starlight prepared for departure, a small delegation of Kalins arrived. Duri led them, her crest feathers decorated with symbols of her newfound freedom. We bring a gift, she told Yuna, presenting a small crystal sphere. It's a star map of our homeworld sky, so you remember where you came from, even as you journey to new places. Yuna accepted the gift with a formal bow. I will never forget, and I will return one day to see our mountains again. Tell your human friends, another Kalin said, that they have allies now among the stars. The debt we owe can never be repaid. There is no debt, Hyun said, stepping forward. Only friendship, freely given and accepted. As the Starlight lifted away from the hub, Yuna took her place on the bridge. Not as a servant or even as a passenger, but as crew, as family. Her console displayed navigation data, a position Jisoo had been training her for. Course laid in, she reported, the words still new but growing more comfortable each day. Take us out, Mina, Hyun ordered from the captain's chair. The ship hummed to life around them, carrying them toward distant stars and new adventures. Yuna's wings caught the light from the view screen, fully healed and strong. She had been discarded as worthless, but now she soared among the stars, not despite humans' compassion, but because of it. In saving her, they had started a revolution that would change the galaxy forever, and Yuna would be there to see it unfold, one star at a time.